% about what these, amazing women are doing. So a little introduction about myself. I think I've taken a few more time. I'm Sophia Uko. I'm the founder of Violet Simon, and Violet Simon is a media company basically that amplifies the voices of women from all walks of lives. And we try to do that using authentic storytelling to explore the lives of women, their experiences, the challenges, accomplishments, and milestones in order to inspire other people and potentially generate calls to actions on key issues that affect women. And a little bit about myself is I'm Nigerian and Nigerian and British, and I have my journey through entrepreneurship has started like, I don't know, it's spanned over over a decade. And I think I'm inspired. A lot of my work is inspired from my own personal experiences growing up. Because I grew up from, probably a relatively privileged background compared to, most. And though that was the case for me, I still experienced a very unhealthy amount of abuse. And I didn't understand what was going on with me. And also, some of the issues that I dealt with was, abuse of every shape, size, and form. And I tried to look for women who, stories of women who, had maybe were going through some of the things I had gone through. And I really wasn't able to see so many stories like that. And, a lot of the recurring part of my childhood was also listening to people always telling me how it was very impossible for a woman, or especially a Black woman, to be able to attain certain goals. And it was very daunting for me. And I have been very fortunate anyway to have a great support, and great, support around me. And so a lot of the things that I'm passionate about, from equality, feminism, and even mental health as well, is also because of some of the challenges I've gone through, and even from speaking with women from various walks of life. So I've seen that the very common thing is, one, there is hardly support, and even that there's lack of awareness. So basically, I struggled with the mental illness and abuse for years, and I didn't realize that I was actually living in that. I didn't realize I had those issues until I actually sought help, and I actually had to come out of my bubble, basically. And I think I'm actually very fortunate, because there's not many people who actually have that. And when we talk about even amplifying voices of women, it's also because one of the major things I think is very one of the major things I think is very important is that every human being, no matter how great you are, it's very important that we are seen and we are heard. And when we're talking about equality, and when we're talking about women's rights and other things, even for girls as well, is that important, and awareness of having to be seen and to be heard, and also to inspire people. As a young girl, I wasn't exposed to, I didn't know many books, and I don't know if it was that they were not available, or it was that there were just not many women in that environment who were actually doing that. But I think it was probably a mixture of both, and it's very important that we
look forward to discussing the notes with you
as much as we can. As much as we, sorry, I'm being distracted by somebody's. Okay, yeah, as much as we can. Yeah. And with Disruptors, I have sought to share the stories of women who have literally gone against the grain in their personal and professional lives, and made inroads in inaccessible areas. Women who have pushed the boundaries in their professions, who have led movements, who are leading movements that actually lead to change in both small social contracts and also large social contracts. Yeah, so have women who are doing amazing things, names you may know about, and we know of rather, and we also have women, you know, like the woman next door. Like,
which is also why the last thing I want to do.
We're doing things in there. Sorry, can I just say that I think I'm being distracted, but yeah, okay. And we have women who are doing amazing things as well in, you know, the everyday woman, and it's just about, you know, creating that diverse, bringing the diverse voices of women, because I truly believe that everything that we do and every work that every woman does is really, really relevant, and there's a power in storytelling. And, you know, the media obviously sometimes hasn't done a lot of justice in, you know, amplifying voices of women, especially when you're talking about representation and, you know, inclusion as well. And what we're trying to do with Disruptors is amplify the voices of women who are actually challenging the status quo. And I will take a quote from something I wrote in the series 1 of the Disruptors, which is, I'll just paraphrase, but basically, if you notice, every transformative agent of change has had to do something which is disrupt the status quo. And it's absolutely necessary for us to, you know, challenge things and disrupt things that no longer serve us. And in history, when we're looking at history, whether it's history in, you know, human rights, you know, issues that affect women, but the gender or race, you know, and other factors, some people have chosen to say, this doesn't serve us, this is not okay, and we need to do something about it, and we need to change something about it. And then they actually take those steps. And, you know, when women do that, or people do that, they're actually, you know, they're taking risk. And it's about, you know, amplifying these women and appreciating what they're doing. And, you know, hopefully this inspiring other people to do much more. And that's just what the Disruptive series is about. And for the panel discussion here today, and why we're here today, is also to learn more from, you know, amazing women who have actually, you know, gone against the grain. I'll use that word again, and learn from them, hear their stories, hear their journeys, and see how we can just, you know, apply that even in our personal lives too, because it's also about, you know, sometimes you have to remove yourself from maybe certain environments, or make a change in your own personal life and say, you know what, I'm going to change the, you know, the norm. For me, it was deciding to say I was going to remove myself also from the environment that was, you know, very, the norm was abuse, the norm was toxicity and all of that. And, you know, taking that bold step to separate myself from that and get help so that I could actually live and thrive as a human being. So I would, without further ado, I would introduce Rahel Tesfai. I hope I got that name right. Rahel Tesfai and and Nicola. They are amazing women who have done amazing things. Rahel is the founder of FroHub, and Nicola is the founder of Surviving Economic Abuse. And I truly believe that I would introduce these women, but I think that they would do better justice at introducing themselves, talking a bit about what they've done and what their platform is, and then we would then start the panel discussion shortly after they've introduced themselves. So I'll leave the floor to Rahel, and after that, Nicola would speak and introduce herself. So thank you.
Hi, is my microphone still working?
Yeah, it is.
Okay. Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you, Sophia, for the invite to join this, you know, amazing panel of women and the amazing community. Love hearing your story. Hi, I'm Rahel. I'm founder and CEO of FroHub. So FroHub is a thriving Afro hair and beauty community, and also a marketplace booking platform. And our vision is to make access to Black hair care easy. My work background is actually in marketing and technology, so nothing to do with beauty. I used to be a front-end developer and then a marketeer, and had a pretty rewarding career kind of heading up digital and strategic marketing in global, established, and also disruptive startup businesses. And when prior to starting FroHub, I didn't have any experience in founding a company. But it was personal frustration and also a gap in the market that led me to start FroHub. I noticed that the Black hair market is currently highly inefficient. And through FroHub, I wanted to really eliminate time waste for Black women by providing an intuitive and highly visual method to easily search and discover hairdressers and also book appointments. and also provide the Black community with a way to exchange tips and advice on Afro hair health through blogs, forums, and tutorials. So I'm really on a mission to just shake up the hair industry and achieve greater accessibility and inclusion for Black women through FroHub. And I'd say the experiences and skills learned from my previous work roles have enabled me to create a great team, a community, and also the tech platform that we're running. Do you want me to go in on anything else?
No, thank you, Rahel. That's amazing, and that's really inspiring. As a Black person, as a Black woman, I can totally relate. I was talking to you earlier about my own hair experiences. So thank you for creating such an amazing platform. Like, I've already referred a lot of my friends to your platform as well.
Thank you.
So yeah, over to Nicola.
Hi, Sophia. Hi, everyone. And yeah, just a massive thank you. It's a real privilege to be on this panel with these other disruptors. I think you're an inspiration, Sophia, just in terms of your own journey and what you're going to do and creating this platform for us. So thank you. I quite enjoy being called a disruptor now. It's something that I start talking about. I say, oh, I'm going to go off and do a bit of disruptoring. I've turned it into a bit of a verb, I think. I sort of really like the idea, and I'd never kind of viewed the work I did in that way before. So I just want to thank you for kind of framing it in that way, and taking something which, as you say, can be quite negative into a positive space. But okay, I think sort of quite similar to Rahel, I haven't founded a charity before. My background is in policy and parliamentary influencing, but always in human rights. And I was really struck about the issue of violence against women and girls across the world, including in the UK. And after sort of some time in the international development community, I decided to focus my efforts in the UK. And it was really through speaking to survivors of abuse that I recognised the economic controlling tactics that perpetrators would use. So speaking to women about their experiences of abuse, maybe that was physical, sexual, emotional, but their economic well-being always threaded through those descriptions. So perhaps they couldn't leave because their partner wouldn't let them have access to money, or they weren't allowed to drive the car that might be sort of insured, taxed, and owned in their name. They had no control over their access to their own economic resources. And some women I spoke to, said life was so difficult having left, because there was very minimal support. Certainly for women with no recourse to public funds in the UK who don't have that cushion or safety net of welfare benefits, that perhaps they might have to go back to that abuser because of the lack of support. So for me, it was really about our mission as a charity to raise awareness of economic abuse and to seek to transform responses to it, be that through the welfare system, but in a lot of other sectors and spaces as well. And I think the importance of raising awareness of this form of abuse, really speaks to your intro again, Sophia, around women recognizing those experiences, that control they were experiencing was wrong, but not perhaps having the word just to explain what that was about. So to know that it is a thing, and that it is wrong, and this is what it is, and also really importantly to be able to communicate that to other people as well. So our work is not about just raising awareness amongst victims and survivors, but also, all those different stakeholders that a victim survivor would be in contact with, who needs that support to help them exit the situation that they're in. And so that economic abuse will look different in lots of different contexts. And so we work within the violence against women and girls sector, but also in financial services, custom vulnerability spaces, with the police, any stakeholder that a victim or survivor would come into contact with, so that they can recognise what those signs look like in that context and know what responses are appropriate. So that's a little bit about what brought me into this work, I guess, and what we're doing as a charity to address this issue.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. Yeah, thank you so much, Nicola. That's amazing. You're an inspiration, and I just have to say I learned a lot when I was speaking with Nicola about economic abuse, because I had no idea it was actually a thing. And it's also amazing because I had actually gone through something similar, but I just didn't recognize it as an abuse. I just thought it was just one of those things that happened. And then just bringing that awareness and hearing more stories, because the more I've, when we launched Disruptors and, amplified a lot more about even some of what Nicola was doing, and you realize that there's so many women who this has happened to. And, a lot of women actually, I've actually heard so many women who are saying that they're amazed of all you're doing and they would love to, get to speak with you. So yeah, thank you so much for what you're doing. And so we're going to start the panel discussion now. And I think my first question would be, how does one identify an opportunity for disruption? Can you hear me? Oh, I can hear you. Okay, so you're muted. You're muted, so you have to unmute. Yes.
Yeah, I think we're all kind of considering the question, really. I think for me, it was about recognizing, that kind of need, that women were speaking about this particular form of control and the impact it was having on their safety, because, if they couldn't leave, they were likely experiencing physical and sexual harm, emotional abuse, isolation, intimidation, alongside, and to not address that, and to recognize that it could happen to any one of us, and that you could find yourself in that scenario, made me think that somebody had to do something. So I guess sometimes it's quite scary to do something like give up a day job and a regular income, and to kind of do something that you've never done before, and not knowing whether that's going to be successful in terms of the outcomes for the survivors, but also to be able to continue to function yourself. So I think for me it was the kind of recognition that something needed to happen, and having kind of seen what was going on in other parts of the country, almost a responsibility to do so.
That's amazing. And yeah, Rahel.
I'd agree with Nicola in the, recognizing that something needs to happen. I think for me with FroHub, it was actually probably about 3 or 4 different experiences that helped me identify that, okay, something needs to be done here. There's this is like a very large, fragmented, underserved markets. So one thing was, I always tell people about my Vietnam story. So I was traveling to Vietnam, and before my trip, because of the humidity over there, I wanted to get my hair braided. So a week before the trip, I just desperately searched several hashtags on Instagram, to try to find a hairdresser, asked friends and family, and my sister. Then she asked her friend who managed to find me someone, and I ran across London to this lady's house. And she was doing my hair, was like eating chicken with her hands and then touching my hair. And I was just left so shocked by, the poor service, the poor result, like the professionalism, and the fact that this is just how it is. We deserve a better level of service. Another experience was being turned away from high street salons purely because of my Afro hair, which, left me sad and frustrated. I remember quite a few instances, even with walking with my sister into this salon, and we didn't even say a word, just like stepping one foot in, they just said, "We don't serve you." And so these are like real experiences. And then I also read about this article where it said a lack of Afro-Caribbean hairdressers was cited as the reason why Black students stopped applying to Cambridge University. And that was kind of the final straw that, just said, what, I need to do something here, because we keep saying that something needs to be done, but someone needs to just, focus 100% on doing this. And I decided then to just leave my very comfortable job and just kind of go for it.
Amazing. That's truly inspiring. And now it's something that I would maybe like a follow-up, because when you're talking about disruption or doing something disruptive, there's also I would say, the mental aspect. And so my question would be, with all what the both of you are doing and you've achieved and you're still, aiming to achieve, how does one position themselves, mentally for any pushback that comes with, creating something, that is disruptive, that is, challenging something, or, solving, or being, creating something of impact?
I don't want to keep jumping in, Rahel, if you wanted to come in next, or
Sorry?
I don't want to keep.
No, I don't know which way we're doing it, but
No,
anybody's fine. It's fine. Yeah.
I mean, I suppose for me, as I said, there's, and it's a similar, it's very different areas, isn't it? But really similar themes that Rahel and I think are speaking to, where we kind of felt the need to do something, that it needed to be someone, if no one else was going to do it, we would do it, women deserved better, and giving up kind of, quite comfortable lifestyles or putting those at risk, I guess, in order to do that. So I think, there is that kind of fear, perhaps it won't work out, but I think, kind of tempered with a, perhaps I'll regret it more if I don't try kind of feeling. So I think there's a general impact mentally there, in terms of your kind of emotional sort of well-being linked to, anxiety and stress and so on and so forth if things don't go as you would like them to. I think the nature of the work that we do at Surviving Economic Abuse in and of itself, is difficult. A lot of survivors work at surviving economic abuse. That's very common in the violence against women and girls sector. Again, amazing women who've been through things and want to make a difference for other women. So there's sort of trauma from personal experiences, but then, kind of hearing day in, day out, some of the things that women experience, can be vicariously, traumatic. And then, sometimes you kind of do get that pushback, certainly in the violence against women and girls space, quite often that's from men, asking about what about men too, and we of course recognise that everyone experiences abuse, but that women are disproportionately likely to, and in certain ways that are very life-threatening, because of our inequality, and because a lot of what happens, does happen in plain sight, and is so, as you say, Sophia, because of the way we've been conditioned and gender stereotypes, we think, well, actually that's just the way it is, as opposed to recognise that we need better. So, I think emotionally, mentally, certainly my experience kind of operates on lots of different levels, and certainly we have a lot of space within our team, for reflective practice, talking some of these issues through, to look after our emotional and mental well-being, because we recognise that we really need to. So I think it's a really great question.
Thank you. Over to you, Rahel.
Let me just make sure I got the question right. So it was about
yeah, it was just about how you position yourself, mentally for, pushbacks that come with, creating the disruptive work. I remember from even your interview in Disruptors, there's a quote that I've actually used when you talked about even like sometimes you've had to take like deep breaths, when you're going into meetings and, things like that. So how do you prepare yourself mentally for pushbacks that come with what you're doing?
So I think like as a first step, before you even like anything, is just be just very clear about why you're doing what you're doing. What are you trying to achieve? Because you'll just have a better chance of achieving that. I mean, there will be a lot of pushbacks and kind of multiple risks as well to like starting a business. But I think when you like believe in your purpose, when you believe deeply in what you're doing, what you're creating, and the impact that you will have, it's easier to deal with that, to deal with the risks, and you kind of develop the resilience to withstand, pushbacks, rejection, criticism, and so on. Mm-hmm. I think, and no matter kind of like who you are, when you do like have a dream and are committed to achieving it, you first of all, you will face a lot of critics and experience many rejections. I think some of the obstacles to success is your fear and belief in what a critic says, but it's very important to look at that feedback and see what can be successfully applied to refine and make your business project, whatever you're working on, better, and then kind of move on.
Amazing. Thank you so much. That's so insightful. I would take some of that food for thought because I know I do need that. Now, speaking of still in that same vein of, pushbacks, what are some of the challenges, that you faced, in challenging status quo, advocating for change and, implementing, what are some of the challenges you faced doing basically the work that you do? And, how have you been able to navigate through those challenges? Anyone can start.
Okay,
Rahel, you can go.
I don't want to be talking twice, but it's fine. So challenges, I've had I would say multiple probably challenges. So I guess in the past I've been actually just guilty of neglecting my self-care. I've been so focused on getting the job done that it just wasn't a priority. But one thing I've realized is in this entrepreneurship journey, it's actually a marathon, not a sprint. So I've tried to intentionally carve out space and time to take care of myself. And actually an entrepreneur friend of mine gave me the great idea of scheduling me time into my daily task list. So it's actually in my, okay, you can't see my phone, but it's in my calendar. And me time can be anything from, meditating, journaling, watching TV. For me, it's going to the gym, eating my lunch away from my desk, and enjoying it rather than, rushing it down. I placed more importance on my health, my fitness over the past year, and it's definitely helped my productivity levels. And, kind of making sleep a priority, try to one other thing is learning to say no. I think is very important because we tend to just overschedule ourselves and then feel overwhelmed, unable to finish our tasks. And I think if there's any entrepreneurs in this call, the one piece of advice I can share is just not to feel guilty about prioritizing yourself and your mental well-being.
Thank you so much, Rahel. Over to you, Nicola.
Yes, I think there's similar challenges. I think when you start something, you kind of almost have to take every opportunity that there is going to kind of get it going, to meet the right people, to get some momentum going. And that can so sort of easily lead to kind of a habit of doing that, and that overwork piece that Rahel's speaking to, getting up at, very early in the morning, sort of working quite late. It can be difficult when you are passionate about something because you kind of live and breathe it in some ways. It can be very enjoyable. You can feel like you're making a real difference, and when there's that traction, it can be very exhilarating. But it is exhausting, and it is really important to look after yourself within all of that. And certainly, contexts, constantly change. I think challenges in terms of the practicalities of setting up and running a charity, move from, kind of you doing all and everything at the beginning until you can kind of get the resource that you need to grow a team, to distribute that responsibility. So, resources are always quite difficult, especially if you're not kind of marketing a product, you're kind of trying to sell more of an idea to funders, to demonstrate impact, and their standards can be very high, and there's lots of other people doing similar. Kind of the political environment, certainly when I established Surviving Economic Abuse, it came at a really good time because politically work was being done around, creating, transformative legislation in this space. And also at the same time, there was a customer vulnerability agenda that we were able to be part of. But, we only have to look at the happenings of today to know that all that work and those relationships that you create in the political space, for example, can, also disappear. And, a lot of the very supportive ministers that we work with have resigned today from the government. So, there's a kind of that political uncertainty. I think, when you grow a number of team members, it's very important to be thinking about their welfare as well. I certainly think, during COVID, that, exacerbated You know, a lot of mental health problems for the team. You know, so you're always sort of, you know, trying to create that balance, I guess, between sort of achieving and supporting victims and survivors, but ensuring that, you know, your team are well to be able to do that, because none of us can work, you know, if we're in that situation. You know, life still happens, but through the, you know, the COVID lens, which was really difficult for lots of us, and, you know, lots of layering of challenges there. So, you know, just making sure that you get it right in terms of, you know, the care that you extend to your team as well. So, you know, and the more sort of people you have, the more, you know, personal issues, you know, arise. So I think for me, it's on sort of lots of different levels, whether that be sort of individual or the context that I'm in or the people that I'm working with. You know, the one thing that I have learned is that there's always a challenge. You know, you kind of start off initially thinking that maybe you'll overcome all of those challenges one day, but actually I think I've learned that you don't, but that, you know, some of those challenges which have felt really difficult, you know, every time you kind of overcome one, it kind of gives you the confidence that you can kind of just, you know, you've been there, you've done it before, you can do it again. You know, it's almost kind of part of the nature of you know, doing that disrupting, you know, because I guess in the way that you become more successful or well known, you know, perhaps more pushback and more challenges you will get.
Wow, thank you so much, Nicola. That's amazing. That's amazing advice as well. Now it would be as a follow-up to, you know, when you're talking about challenges and, you know, pushbacks and all that, what would be your advice to people who are passionate about creating positive change in the society for others or for themselves? You know, because, you know, as we talked about, you know, when you're disrupting as well, it could be daunting. You will have to take risk, and yeah, there will be challenges as well as successes and milestones. So if you were to advise someone, you know, anyone who is looking to, you know, say, you know what, I want to change, you know, create positive change in my life, or, you know, in the society and for other people, you know, what advice, what would be like, you know, one or two advices you would give to people who are trying to do things like that? I would start with Rahel.
So I'd say maybe going back to what I mentioned previously about first being very clear about you know, what it is that you want to do and why. Because if you know what you're trying to achieve, you know, the better chances you have of actually achieving it. I think surround yourself with the right people, find a mentor or talk to people you know with, you know, experience of, you know, similar things that, you know, maybe that you're planning to do. I think networking is super important. Attend, you know, relevant events. Look through your network, you know, and also see, you know, who might want to join you on that journey. I don't think you always have to like push it solo. I'm a solo founder, and I've it's been hard, and you can see the difference between people who work, you know, starting off as, for example, co-founders and so on. It's usually easier when you have someone to bounce ideas off, and it's also not such a lonely journey. Because even as, you know, if I may have family, partner, and my team around, I think it can still be a lonely journey if you don't have, you know, the co-founder level person from the entrepreneur side.
Amazing, thank you. Nicola?
It's a bit of a carbon copy answer, really. I've made two notes, which was like passion and people. So yeah, that passion, the belief, you know, you really, for me, when I advise people who talk about setting up a charity, you know, it is hard work. You do need to really believe in what you're doing and be passionate about it to get it going, but also to be able to communicate that passion to everybody else. So, you know, having that kind of clear plan about why you're doing it, to bring other people on board. I totally agree with Rahel. You can't do it solo. You know, it's about, you know, kind of creating that passion in other people. You know, so one of the things I get really excited about when we bring on a new team member, you know, is that passion that you see, you know, through interview, you know, through the work that they're doing. You know, you can see that they're absolutely committed to the same. And certainly we work with partners, as I say, across, you know, different industries, sectors, spaces. And what I've really loved over time is that, you know, people have become committed in their own spaces. You know, they'll transform the organisation they're in, they might transform the industry that they're in. If they move somewhere else, you know, they're so passionate about this issue that they'll do the same there. You know, there's some real sort of what I call economic abuse champions out there. And we're always kind of looking for more if anyone's interested. So yeah, it's a much easier journey, you know, when it's that kind of that shared sort of passion and purpose, and you're sort of able to communicate that to other people.
Amazing. Yes, and still speaking about that, you know, when we're talking about people who, you know, creating positive impact and advice, do women and people from underrepresented communities face more challenges walking this path, you know, of basically, you know, challenging the status quo, you know, creating a positive impact, and you know, and after, you know, that being said, and what can be done, what do you think can be done in terms of, you know, of that? How, you know, is there actually anything that can be done about it, and if so, what would be your take on, you know, on that? Rahel, since Nicola just spoke.
Maybe I'll talk about it from like the entrepreneurship side.
Yeah.
And I think women and Black women especially do face way more challenges. So like, you know, for example, when it comes to funding, there's a lot of data out there about how Black women get, you know, way less funding. It's actually just ridiculous. I think, you know, and there's a lot of conversation happening about what can be done, and so on. I think, again, I think I mentioned networking before. I think that's super important. It's like network, because opportunity does not knock. It, you know, it presents itself when you like beat down the door. So you need to get in those rooms and, you know what to do and say once you are inside as well. Which your, you know, your network, your mentors can help with, because you don't, like, you know. So taking my example, I'm a refugee. So I came to Sweden from Eritrea at a very, very young age, and with my single mother. And you know, my mother did not know anything about it. She was more concerned about, you know, making sure we had food on the table, you know, and a roof over our head. It's not all about, you know, this is where, you know, these are the people that, you know, putting us in those positions that may be more privileged, especially perhaps like white men are in whilst growing up. So they naturally have that network. I think if you don't have it, you just have to kind of knock hard, you know, knock all those doors, actually get in there. And I think just like, don't lose sight of your purpose. You know, be very clear about why you're doing it, be consistent, be proactive, and don't be afraid to fail. Failure is just like, you know, a learning opportunity. You know, you learn to use that fear as fuel instead of an obstacle. And I think also with this journey, it's just important to just enjoy it as well. Yeah.
Amazing. That's so inspirational. Thank you. Thank you, Rahel. Over to you, Nicola.
Yes, I suppose two levels really. You know, one being, you know, a woman, you know, the inequality that we face, you know, in terms of being an entrepreneur, doing something different, being disruptive, you know, kind of seen negatively, whereas a man would be seen, you know, quite positively doing that, I guess. You know, I do work in the women's sector, which creates more of a kind of an equal playing field, I guess. But then I think there's a responsibility, you know, in terms of how you support the women in your team, make sure they get their opportunities. We've been doing a lot of work over the COVID period, off the back of a lot of global happenings around being really anti-racist in our practice and coming together as a sector and creating an anti-racism charter, being really mindful of you know, opportunities for funding, for small groups working with Black and minoritized women, which is the wording and language we have used together as a sector. You know, recognizing that there's an unlevel playing field there, you know, that there will be times where, you know, as an organisation that's predominantly white women, you know, we should be stepping back. We should be recognising their own power that we hold within the organisation and the sector that we work in more broadly. So that is very present in our everyday work. You know, we can always do better. And then at the same time, supporting victims and survivors, you know, who are living in society, and a recognition that, you know, people experiencing multiple inequality, you know, will find it more difficult to access the economic resources they need to be safe. You know, it will be harder to support a Black woman to get into work than a white woman. It will be harder to support a disabled woman than an able-bodied woman. Some women, because of their sexuality, might not get the same opportunities. And so we kind of have to recognise that the survivors that we work with, you know, we have to kind of recognise those structural inequalities within society in terms of how we're supporting them, but also, you know, as anyone, as individuals, you know, how their own wants and desires and dreams can and should be responded to. So kind of not losing sight of, you know, being really needs focused and actually saying, what is it, you know, that someone wants to achieve, and how can we kind of really personalise that and not create a kind of one size fits all response to everybody. And again, you know, as a small organisation, we've still got a lot of work to do around that. But for us, it's kind of working around, you know, partnerships, you know, not assuming that we understand different needs of different women, and that we, you know, we're just kind of aware in our own practice, and the way that we behave, that we're not perpetuating a problem, you know, whether that may be a white woman, you know, leading a charitable organisation in the violence against women and girls sector, or whether that be, you know, us as an organisation that supports victims and survivors. So yeah, very present and very front of mind every day in lots of different ways.
Oh, thank you. Yes, you're doing an amazing job. So bravo. And now in terms of you know, getting the work out there, because, you know, it's one thing to, you know, do, you know, create, you know, an amazing project or a business, whatever it is, and it's another thing to actually, you know, have like people listen, you know, create some awareness for that, for what the work that you do. And so my question is, do you have any tips on how to draw public attention to the work that, you know, to one's work, you know, how, you know, you can, you know, draw from whether your experiences or your, you know, expertise, and what, you know, it would be to, in order to, because I believe that publicity is quite a crucial role when you're trying to execute, you know, disruptive works for change. So yeah, what are your tips on, you know, publicity and how to access that, you know, building a community, building, you know, public awareness when you're doing something of, you know, importance, basically. So I'll start with Rahel again, since Nicola just spoke. I
think, you know, really just like grabbing any opportunity that's out there. If you see, like, you know, try to get yourself invited to speak on panels where, for example, they will, like, your target audience actually sits there to really get the word out to them. In terms of publicity, like PR, there's I guess a little bit more from a practical sense. You know, on Twitter, there's always these journal requests where you can you know, follow and see, you know, are they asking something to do within your subject area, and then get them to, you know, approach them to cover you, to get out into like main publications out there. Of course, you know, through social media, depending on, you know, what you're building and which social media is relevant to you. You know, your community may sit mainly on one of them, you know, like ours is heavily on Instagram, so that's where we mainly sit. But then still building it through other areas as well. So LinkedIn, our end users don't really use it, but LinkedIn is good for our getting, you know, so we're gonna gear up for investment at some point soon. So it's good there to just show some signaling to see, you know, what are these guys building, you know, how are they growing, and just sharing some of that excitement around what you're building. Because once you do that, once you put yourself out there, they come to you, they come and they ask you. And in the beginning I was very nervous, still am a bit, to do panel talks and so on, especially in person. But I had to force myself. I was like, what, if I'm gonna get myself out there, if I'm gonna get Rahel out there, I have to just force myself. And the more you do, the more comfortable and confident you get, and the more you understand why you're doing it. What's your mission, your vision, what's the purpose of what you're trying to build, the easier it gets. Yeah, I think that's around. Yeah.
Thank you. Amazing, brilliant answer. Thank you, Rahel. Over to you, Nicola.
Yeah, I think that last point's a really important one, because I'm quite an introvert by nature. So actually putting myself out there and doing all of these things can be quite sort of energy sapping. So it kind of goes back to those kind of initial conversations we had about recognizing that, creating your downtime where you recharge your batteries, you have alone time, kind of recognizing what it takes out of you. Because when you're on your own, certainly at the beginning, it is networking and all those opportunities, kind of creating them, I guess. I think certainly for someone who works for a charity, I have a board of trustees. So actually, whilst the sort of kind of founder or chief executive role can be quite lonely, certainly as a charity, you always have kind of a board of trustees who bring certain skill sets. So certainly we've really benefited, from trustees who are skilled in communications and who can support and offer direction, which is invaluable. But also, for us, we can't speak on behalf of women. We've been survivor centered from the beginning. We want to create a platform where their voices are heard. So for us, a lot of our kind of communications work has relied very heavily on victims and survivors, who do want to create that change for those who come after, and and who bravely speak out, in a way that is, so powerful. That as someone who's not experienced abuse personally, you can't do. So it's very much sort of the generosity of survivors, and from that perspective, we need to facilitate and make sure that they're supported and protected, so that they have emotional support in terms of doing that, and won't be, for example, kind of taken to court for slander or whatever. So lots of considerations about well-being in relation to that. But I think if it wasn't for Survivor Voice, that kind of really resonating with other people, either as survivors themselves to recognize their own experiences, or to kind of create that passion and recognition that things need to change, I think we would really struggle.
Interesting. Thank you, Nicola. And now speaking about, milestones, I think you both have actually created, both had amazing, okay, thank you, Danielle, sorry. So you've both created amazing platforms, and I think you've also quite achieved some amazing milestones. And so I know some of them, and I want you to, if you can talk also about some of the milestones you've achieved. Nicola, I would start with you, sorry, and then we'll go with Rahel. Some of the milestones that, in some of the strides, that you have, accomplished with, what you've done with surviving economic abuse and your campaign, and, your push for creating more awareness and supporting women who have gone through economic abuse.
So I think probably our biggest milestone is political. So I mentioned that the charity started at the same time as new legislation was introduced. So for us, it was about economic abuse being recognised as a form of domestic abuse, so as a form of coercive and controlling behaviour, which is how we understand domestic abuse. So it's not just physical, but as I said, sexual, emotional, economic. So the new Domestic Abuse Act, which came into legislation last year, both names and defines economic abuse. So that's, hugely powerful in and of itself, because it means that certainly statutory agencies do have to now respond to economic abuse you know, and victims and survivors have the right to expect them to do that. So I think that, you know, created a real sort of shift in the landscape. Certainly it created a level of profile, which also really helped, just talking about the comms experience just now. You know, we were quite, because of that work, able, therefore, you know, not to have to be too proactive with media, because the government was talking about this issue and people were interested in it. So that was very helpful. As I said, you know, customer vulnerability agenda, a real recognition by the regulator, the Financial Conduct Authority, membership organisations in financial services like UK Finance, which supports banks, that they needed to do something in the domestic abuse space similarly. You know, amazing innovation there. We have a code of practice now on how banks should respond to survivors of economic abuse, you know, which certainly didn't exist 5 years ago. Some organisations, you know, are particularly proactive in this space in terms of meeting that code of practice. So an example there would be Lloyds Banking Group, who we partner with, who have created a specialist domestic and financial abuse team within their customer vulnerability team more broadly. So that creates a real tailored and you know, understanding approach to victims and survivors, and you know, them changing their processes and practices. So alongside a lot of other banks now, you know, removing somebody's name from a joint bank account without their consent, which again wouldn't have been done pre the code. You know, thinking creatively about how survivors can be delinked from abusers through joint financial arrangements. So I think because we kind of sit at the nexus of those kind of two worlds, the violence against women and girls world and the financial services world in lots of ways, yeah, that's really sort of created that opportunity to kind of have landmark moments along the way. Similarly, we also influenced the domestic abuse bill so that it introduced an amendment to another piece of legislation, which was the Serious Crime Act. So again, up until last year, if you experienced control post separation, that wasn't a criminal offence. It was only a criminal offence when you were still with the perpetrator, the person you were in a relationship with, or a family member that you were living with. So we were also able to influence that. So that has now become a criminal offence as well. So, you know, I think those landmark moments, you know, kind of create a framework within which you can continue to work, and yeah, just create a recognition. And certainly for us, in terms of our space, you know, a statutory requirement actually, certainly within local authorities, but you know, more of a recognition certainly, and increasingly also from you know, corporates and private organisations, certainly that, you know, their teams, their own staff will be likely experiencing these issues as well. So as a responsible employer, they should be doing something about it anyway, but also if they come into contact with clients, customers, you know, that will also be something that's going to be happening as well. So I think, you know, again COVID, I would say cost of living, they just create these recognition or these moments where, you know, people really do recognise the importance of economic safety, the implications of not having it, and you know, events like that have also, I guess, pushed not only economic abuse and domestic abuse more broadly up the public agenda, the political agenda, but also the public agenda as well.
Amazing. Congratulations, Nicola. It's an amazing achievement. And Rahel, over to you.
So I would say that our milestones are all about moving from one challenge to another. So it's like a growth timeline. So milestones like the very early milestones, like, you know, even setting up a business bank account, creating our MVP, which is a minimum version of our platform that still has the capabilities to solve our customers' needs. Our first revenues, making key hires, raising a crowd fund, launching version 2 of our platform, being selected for the Google Female Founders Program. So this goes back to the whole networking part and why it's so important. I would not even have known about that program had I not been in, you know, networking and hearing it from someone else, from another entrepreneur. It's just how you find out about opportunities. And applying for that program was actually the first time I put together a pitch deck and had to do the actual pitching. So it was nerve-wracking, but I believed in our vision and the potential of ProHub. So we got selected to join the program as only, you know, 1 of 10 companies. And from that came a lot of things, you know, a lot of publication and getting, kind of to speak at the Google Executive Summit, again, which helped with getting really good mentors, PR, just getting the word out there, building our community. And I guess one of the more recent milestones was traveling to San Francisco to scope the US ecosystem and to speak to investors and founders out there as well. Yeah, I would say like milestones are definitely just, like a growth timeline.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Rahel. I think it's so important because I think sometimes we get stuck with, I do that a lot, when you're so hard on yourself and thinking, oh, I haven't achieved enough, or this milestone is too small and I want to get to that point. But it's about, I don't want to misquote you, but basically, yeah, thank you for that. And I think we're kind of running over time, so I'll probably just maybe say thank you so much, Rahel and Nicola, for speaking with us and sharing lots of your nuggets and experiences, stories, everything with us. It's amazing, and I'm really grateful for for you being part of this. Thank you. And I think I'm just going to leave it to the floor. If there are any questions anyone has to ask Rahel or Nicola, feel free to ask either in the chat, or you can just raise your hand or something, or just unmute your screen and ask away. So yeah,
I've got a question. Hello, the other Nicola. Hello. So amazing hearing everything that you've both been saying from two completely, obviously different industries and different perspectives as well. And I know you're both busy enough, but if you were to disrupt another area or another issue or another sector, what would it be? I know what I would try and do, but I'd probably try and have a go at US politics at the moment, but I'm, even though I'm not qualified, but yeah, I just really intrigued where you would both go next if you could disrupt in a whole other area.
Yeah, good question. I think so I think it's really important to be passionate about whatever area it is that you go for, because if you don't have that passion, it won't go far. You'll stop working on the thing. So for me, it would probably be something around health and nutrition. I've recently got really obsessed with just like reading all about, certain things that, like, I guess throughout my entrepreneurial journey has things that have affected me. Then, I've looked more into it and thought, oh, actually, I think something can be done about this. So it would definitely, I think, be within that space, which is something I'm really interested in and, constantly kind of read up on.
Yeah, it's such an interesting question. And again, I have the same starting point. It's the stuff I'm passionate about that I know I can really commit to, I guess, and feel that energy for. So for me, it would be, sort of other things that are dear to my heart. So an example right now would be seeking to raise awareness around scoliosis, which is a curved spine condition, one that if I hadn't recognized early and had surgery for, I would be most likely in a wheelchair by now. I might not be here. I might not be able to do the work that I've been able to do. It makes you very grateful, for the hospitals, for the surgeons. So I think, it sounds quite self-interested, doesn't it, when you say it like that? But I think it's, a kind of recognition that you want to, create change for other people and make sure that they, have the same opportunities and privileges, and you kind of recognize the importance of the work, I guess.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No? Okay. All right, so we'll move on to the next, which would be the wonderful Charlotte. And I think I don't know if we can just use our emotions to just maybe give a an applause to Rahel and Nicola for everything, like what they've said and everything. And thank you so much. Yes, so thank you. So Charlotte is a psychotherapist, and she is the oh, sorry, somebody just had a question. So the question is from Steph, and she says, do you have any advice for disrupting when you have less power and are challenging those in power? Do you get the question? So I just have that one question before we move on to the next agenda, because we're running out of time. So I'm just saying the question again. The question is, do you have any advice for disrupting when you have less power and are challenging those in power? So, and then, Nicola can go, yeah. And after that, Rahel.
Yeah, I think there's, there's power in numbers. It's about collective voice and coalition, for example, in the charity sector. So, again, Surviving Economic Abuse is a small charity, but, have we just kind of launched independently, not worked closely with the women's sector, not had their support, we wouldn't have been able to achieve what we did. It was the support of others. So I think it's about sort of finding spaces where people are standing alongside you. And is that kind of that power in numbers, I guess, where it's difficult for perhaps individuals in power to continue to ignore you.
Amazing. Thank you, Nicola. Rahel, do you have any advice? No.
I think I'll just echo Nicola there. I think that was a great answer.
Yeah, power in numbers. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the same thing, even with what I'll just chip in something that I don't know if you're very familiar with the Women's Equality Power party. Sorry, it's something they do as well. So they tend to, like I said, power in number. They would have like people volunteer to maybe call your MP or call the the people in power, and just keep calling them, so by the time you have like thousands of people flooding your phones about certain issue, and that's just basically it. And I think just finding your community. So yeah, thank you so much for that. So yes, we're going to move on now, and any other questions would probably be maybe after the speech that the talk and the conversation that Charlotte and I are going to have. So Charlotte is a psychotherapist, and she's the author of What We Want, and she's going to be giving a talk. Sorry, just 1 second. She's going to be giving a talk on desire, basically want, and how. Charlotte, let me just give the floor to you rather, so I don't mumble what you're going to say. And just
great,
because I'm not the one.
So I want to make this as interactive and lively and energizing as possible, because I know it can sometimes be difficult to just be talked at. And we're a nice, cozy group. So please feel free to interrupt, and also just, if you can, take notes for yourself, not about my ideas or anything, but just thinking for yourself about what desire means, so that it's more kind of pertinent to you. So my book, What We Want, is about desire. It's about our underlying longings and our fantasies. And one of the things that I've discovered is that we keep secrets from ourselves as well as from other people. And we end up keeping our desires secret from ourselves, so that we have no idea what we want or why we're in certain situations, and we feel stuck, we feel trapped, resentful, frustrated. In psychotherapy, people often have an easier time complaining and describing obstacles than actually addressing what they might hope for, what they might really long for. And I think we all have it in us to uncover our desires. We're full of desire, but we've been socialized to conceal things and to hide. And in a way, we play hide and seek with desire. So we pretend to want things we don't necessarily want, and we banish desires that we think might make us less appealing, less desirable. I'm aware it's an all-female crowd, so I do think that I mean, gender stereotypes are difficult to make, but I do think that it's still a female issue that men can experience as well, but we're socialized to be desirable more than to be the desiring one. So one of the messages that a lot of us struggle with without full awareness is the idea that showing desire, admitting desire can be tolerated. So in the workplace, you might feel like admitting that you actually want a promotion might be grotesque. It might make you seem like an egomaniac. It might be unsightly. So we end up hiding all sorts of things that we long for, and we just push it away, and then life doesn't turn out the way we wish it would. I think it's interesting to consider the ways you may be hiding from yourself. So just as a starting point, note something that you might secretly want, and if nothing comes to mind, that's okay. But if you know that you're kind of pretending not to want something that you really want, just think about what it is. And then think about something that you're supposed to want, something that you should want. It's the kind of tyranny of the shoulds. You should behave in a certain way. You should seek something. It could be at work. It could be in your personal life. I think whatever culture you're from, whatever your religion, whatever your background, your disposition, you have your own idiosyncratic way of relating to desire and to pretending and following certain rules. So if you can think of something that you should want, think about where that comes from. Who's telling you that you should want a certain thing? Is it coming from parents, from friends, from the culture you're in? Question the voice or the many voices. And it's not about completely rejecting it, but just understanding why you may be feeling pressured in that way. So I think it's fair to say that conflict is essential for any plot. It's part of every story, and we're all conflicted about desire. We want too much, we want too little, we want the wrong things, we want something that we can't have, we don't want what we do have. This conflict doesn't just go away, but I think understanding the conflict, embracing the conflict makes life richer and opens up possibilities. Because when we face our secrets, you can discover that actually you really want a baby, or you might realize that you really want more power in the workplace. It doesn't mean that it has to be completely fulfilled, but it does clarify something, and it's something that feels true and authentic. So we all fake it, and we're socialized to fake it. And by we, I mean every human being who's remotely civilized. You pretend that you're okay with standing in a line. You wait to go to the bathroom. You say thank you for a present, even if you don't really like it. I mean, we aren't always good at faking it, but I think manners of any sort ask us to fake it a little bit. Think of the last time you faked a desire. It could be saying yes to something you secretly didn't want to say yes to. It could be faking an orgasm. It could be pretending not to want something in the workplace, but actually wanting it. It could be faking enthusiasm in a conversation with someone you find really dull, but you smile and you go along with it and you pretend to be curious. Whatever it is, think about where that comes from, the kind of social calling that has made you cultivate a bit of a kind of facade, a bit of a mask for yourself. It's not about getting rid of that fake self, but I do think it makes a huge difference when you know that that's your fake self, when you can kind of talk to your inner self and say, okay, I'm faking it right now. I actually don't feel very comfortable, but for various reasons, I'm going to go along with this. Whatever it is, it's helpful when you can kind of recognize the layers. So when we don't think about the difference between our fake self and our real innermost self, it comes at a cost. We shut down, we fall asleep, we start sleep sleepwalking our way through life. We can go into a kind of zombie mode where we're just following the same routine, walking to the same place, doing the same job, just kind of living in an autopilot way where we don't feel particularly excited. And fantasies can become extremely pressured and further away from reality. We all have fantasy lives, but for some of us, if we're not in touch with our desires, that fantasy life becomes the unlived life, the kind of beautiful unlived life that should be ours but isn't. And if you think about your unlived life, it's a little bit like a storage facility. And actually, whenever I pass big yellow storage, I think of some of the treasures that I've kept there and some of the emotional treasures that we can kind of lock away. So the unlived life is the life that could have been, and it's very convincing. In the unlived life, you furnish it with if only stories and one day stories. So if only something had gone differently and you had been born at a different moment, or if only you'd said yes when that person asked you to go on a trip, then everything would be turning out beautifully right now. One day stories are one day that person will know and he will apologize and then I'll be happy. Or one day I'll have the money to do what I really want to do and I'll feel free. If only in one day stories hijack us and take us away from living our lives in a kind of congruent way, because we are putting our treasures into storage. And there's a kind of deprivation that comes with that. So if you think about your unlived life, consider what longings you've put away there and why you feel that you can't bring them into your current life. So I'm going to tell a story about the first patient I had. I call her a patient. I usually call them clients, but this was a woman in a hospital in London, and she was very ill. She was in her late 60s and she had advanced cancer. I'll call her Tessa. She requested therapy and I had no experience. I was very young and hopeful and somewhat idiotic. And I arrived at her bed and she immediately started in and trusted me just instantly. And she said she wanted to speak freely and honestly. And in her words, she said, "I want to get my house in order." And she wanted to tell me about her regret. She regretted not snuggling her boys more when they were little. They were all grown up now. And as she lay dying, she was just ravaged with regret for having missed hours and hours of what could have been close, loving time together. And I found it unbearable to hear about her regret. Regret is very uncomfortable. We don't like having regret. We don't like hearing about regret. It made me want to kind of fix things or make it better. And I ended up saying certain prosaic things like, "Can't you tell your sons now that you wish you snuggled them more?" She asked me not to talk her out of her regret because she was actually really okay with having the regret. And she kept saying regret is a form of wanting and it's hopeful because it means that there's more that's possible. And it's also just true. She wasn't convinced by all of the tricks and the justifications that she'd used throughout her life. She talked about how she had pretended to be cold, but actually she was a very warm person. And she wasn't sure why she'd covered up her warmth, but the depth of her emotions always scared her. I clearly learned more from her than whatever I offered her. She also talked about a secret that she hadn't been able to tell anyone, and she, again, trusted me instantly. The secret was that her husband had another child with another woman, and she had never confronted him about it, but she knew that this had happened, and she felt that he behaved in a better way because of the secret, because he was on his best behavior to make up for the scandal, and she'd never been able to face it or deal with it. But she also wanted me to understand that despite this betrayal, she really loved her husband, and she also felt very loved by him, and she didn't want me judging or seeing her in a certain light. And I accepted that. She talked about how she'd always believed that one day she would enjoy her life. She would be warm. She would spend time with her children. She would let loose. She would spend the money that she'd been saving. And she would just take pleasure in everyday existence. And then she said, "Here I am. One day never comes. Don't wait." So she stayed with me. She kind of terrified me in a certain way because everything she said made sense, was reasonable, poignant, and there was very little I could do for her other than bear witness and hold her story. But there was something about her impatience, the impatience of being on her deathbed, that made her expedite the process. And I was drawn to this topic of disrupting because I've always been a very restless person, which is not a particular strength for psychotherapists normally. In fact, restless is one of those words that is usually used in a negative way, but I think it can also have its benefits. If I sound like I'm humble bragging, I probably am. But restlessness was so galvanizing for this woman because she just didn't have time to mess around. And psychotherapy, I obviously really believe in it. It can sometimes indulge a certain type of avoidance, of delaying, of going over problems and understanding what's wrong without looking at what might actually be possible. And a terminal illness disrupts all of that. And this woman had to get a move on, and her life was still cut too short. And there's something about impatience and jumping in and not just trusting that everything will work out one day, but insisting that that start as soon as possible. So her message was clear. Don't wait to ask yourself what you really want from life. And she kept saying, I kept secrets from myself. Don't keep secrets from yourself. So it's up to each one of us to decide what matters to us, to prioritize what we want. I don't think that desire has us. I think we have desire. I think that over the course of a day, even in 5 minutes, you feel all sorts of different longings, but you make your own choices, and you're constantly selecting and prioritizing and dealing with demands and responsibilities and circumstances. But it's incredible how easily we can find ourselves in situations where we haven't actually thought clearly about what it is we truly desire. So don't pretend to want things you don't want internally. If you do fake it, and I'm sure we all will because it's part of getting along with human beings, see if you can kind of catch that false self. Don't wait.
Wow, thank you so much, Charlotte. That was such an amazing and very loaded talk. Thank you. And I think most of us can really, I think probably everybody can relate to, that the desire, what you really want, faking it. And I think it's also maybe the fear of the unknown, taking risks and all of that. And so thank you for that perspective. Is there anyone that has like any question, any, basically anything that anyone will have to say, wants to say to Charlotte?
I have a question. So it's for instance, it's like we can have something that we want, and it's not that it's not available to us or it's not ours to have, but sometimes there's that waiting process that can almost feel like at times maybe it's not for me, maybe I should just leave it alone. How do you tackle that when you know something is for you, but the waiting or that period where there's just nothing kind of disheartens you?
Can you be more specific? Can you say anything?
So for instance, it could be, say, a particular line of work where it's like, okay, I know in a few years' time, I'm going to launch out into this, but right now I can't fully because I've got to take care of this, I got to take care of that. And sometimes you can lose sight of something. Or it could even be like a case of where it's like, meeting someone at the wrong time.
Mhm.
You know that person, you both know that it's for you, but it's kind of like a timing thing. And then it's like, how do we, is it a leave it alone situation? Like it's those sorts of things that I sometimes grapple with in life.
Like delayed gratification.
Yeah.
Yeah, and frustration tolerance.
Yeah.
So I think it's really helpful to have a flexible mindset because life never turns out the way we picture. And I think we can make these emotional demands of, it's like we're wagging our fingers, like this is how it should be and this is how it must be, and that never matches reality. So whatever it is that you are kind of insisting on in your future, it probably won't feel that way, even if you do end up having those things concretely, whatever the job is, whoever the guy is. I think it's helpful if you look at the underlying longings and the kind of the bigger values. Like, is it about love? Is it about connection? Is it about power, belonging? I think when you have those kind of crystallized bigger values, then you know the direction of travel, rather than making it just hang on the particulars of those details, if that makes sense.
Yeah, perfect sense.
And then there are always little things you can do. There are always small adjustments you could make. But there's always distance with desire. I mean, I think it's worth appreciating that distance, even though it's annoying, of course. But
Yeah.
actually, the word desire comes from the stars, and I think it's a useful metaphor because you look up at the stars. It's worth looking up at the stars, but it's not as if we get there.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. And yeah, so someone someone asked if you're taking new clients. Monisola asked if you're taking new clients.
Oh,
So I
yeah.
don't know. I would.
I'm not at this moment, but if you want to get in touch with me, I can put you in touch with a great colleague or let you know when I do have space.
Great, thank you.
Right. So and just in case if you want, you can get, I would send links to everyone after the event with, where you can, because Charlotte's book is amazing, What We Want. So if you want to get a copy of the book, you can get a copy through that link. I would send it through an email as well. And I think, we're already running out of time. I know we said it's 6 to 8, but I still, so many people have dropped off as well. And a lot of people were not also able to come. They were not able to make it because of other, impromptu incidents. But thank you guys for, staying through and, engaging. And if you have any other questions, anybody has any questions, feel free to, ask on mute, or you can type. So I would just quickly do some closing rounds and talk about, again, I've already talked about Charlotte's book. If you want to get a copy, you want to get in touch with her, that's, you can speak with her here, and, you can, yeah, I could send you her email as well, or I could do a group email as well. And you can always continue the conversation or the, networking as well afterwards. Nicola just launched a book on economic abuse. It's called Understanding and Responding to Economic Abuse. And it's, I think, a very necessary, it's a necessity that most people, everyone should have. So I'm just going to let her have like maybe a 2 minutes or 3 minutes quick chat about what her book is, and just fire through that. And if you haven't, anybody has any questions about that book, again, I would put the link in the email. So if you want to get a copy of the book, you can access that as well. So over to you, Nicola.
Oh, that's very kind. Sorry, I wasn't expecting that. And I am aware similarly that it's getting later, so I don't want to have people stay on. So just very briefly, it's very much based on our vision. So around, understanding what economic abuse is, so kind of really exploring that, whether that's in intimate partner relationships or perhaps family members or contexts where there's both, for example. And then just thinking about how responses can be transformed. So I suppose like the first half is for everybody, and the second half is for those who work, as I said, across a range of different kind of sectors and industries, around some of the things that they can do to respond to and support victims and survivors better. It's not exhaustive, that kind of list, but I think there's kind of learning that can be taken from different stakeholders and applied in different contexts as well. So even though it might not be written specifically for you, if you feel like you're coming into contact with victims and survivors through your livelihood, then it's probably kind of worth the read, because it kind of might, you know, give you some ideas or trigger some thoughts, I would say. So thanks so much, Sophia, for creating that space. £1.50 of every book sold is going to the charity. So it's about not only understanding the issue more, but if you want to support our cause, that's also a way of doing so.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Nicola. Rahel, I will give you like maybe 2 minutes and 1-2 minutes to talk about, you know, Fur Hub, and, you know, where, again, I'm going to put the link for where anyone, if anyone is interested in, you know, accessing, you know, Fur Hub, the app. So I'll get Rahel to just talk briefly about what it does and how to access it for about a minute or two, and then I would have a closing conversation after. Rahel, are you here? Okay, I don't know if we still have. Oh, she's here.
Yes, sorry about that. I'm still here.
Okay.
Yes, so I didn't realize that I was on mute and my camera is actually off. There we go.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think I described FroHub in the beginning in terms of what it is. It's a marketplace booking platform where we connect Black hairdressers with customers. So focusing on the Afro and curly hair markets. We're also a community where we share, there's a lot of user-generated content. So anyone who's interested in learning more, you know, or maybe not you, maybe you will have friends or, you know, family members that may want to know how to better take care of their Afro hair health. Or connect with a hairdresser, they can come to frohub.com. So Frohub as in Afro, but just Fro. And we're Frohub on all social platforms as well. Instagram is our main channel. Was there anything else you wanted me?
No, thank you. And so finally I would just talk about Violet Simon and the Disruptive series, so promoting that as well. So basically Rahel, Nicola were featured in the series, and even Renee as well. Some people here, some of them have also gone up, were featured in the first series of the Disruptors, and it's about, you know, the stories of women who are challenging the status quo for positive impact in so many areas. And some of us have already heard, or we have already heard some of the things that Rahel, you know, does, and Nicola, you know, does, and all the amazing things they're doing. And there's so many other women who are doing amazing things. So it's literally a collection of 35 women and their stories and their insights in one book, and that's just series 1, and we're going to be having a second series as well. And yes, Charlotte is also going to be there, and some other people who are going to be. I'm not going to say much of some of the women who are going to be. It's going to be a surprise. But yeah, so if you would like to get a copy of that as well, there's a print or digital, please do so. That would also be supporting us and supporting our vision and what we are doing as well. And I would also attach links to that as well in the email, so we can, but you can also access that on our website, violetsimon.co.uk. And I think that is literally everything today, and we can just, you know, chat away maybe for 5 minutes, or if everybody wants to just drop off, and that's fine. But, you know, thank you so much for everything and for coming and, you know, taking the time. Closes the one. Yeah. So yeah, but thank you so much for joining and for wonderful events. All right, so the floor is yours. And yeah.
Thank you so much, Sophia, for inviting us all. Thank you for putting this together. It's been really lovely just hearing everyone's stories. Super inspiring. And I look forward to connecting with everyone here as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll stay on for a few minutes to answer the questions that.
Yeah, someone just asked them a question. Can you see the question?
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Let me write something quickly.
Yeah. Okay. Oh yeah. So well, feel free to unmute if you want, or if you have to leave, then that's fine. Because the whole point is, yeah, okay. The whole point is also to, connect with other people as well. So, well, I think I know some or most people here. So yeah.